Let's open up the Vintage Collection 3.75-inch figure of Jedi Master Sol from the Acolyte. Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. It's an exciting day for this Star Wars collector. We finally have new Star Wars Vintage Collection action figures available here in New Zealand. We found 3 that were on our shopping list. Really excited to add some new Star Wars figures to our collection and really excited to open them up. I'm going to start off with Jedi Master Sol from the Acolyte. The Black Series figures from the Acolyte actually came out a while ago. I was a little bit disappointed that Hasbro didn't release vintage collection figures at the same time. I'm obviously a long time 3.75-inch collector. It is probably my preferred line if I had to choose between the two. I love them both, but at least we finally now have some vintage collection figures from the Acolyte, and Jedi Master Sol was such a standout character from the show. Really excited to check out the details on this figure. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll open up the bubble, get the figure out, and we can go over all of the details and accessories. But first, let's take one last look at the backing card. The packaging style for the vintage collection is heavily inspired by the original Kenner Star Wars action figures from the 70s and 80s. We have the Star Wars logo here at the top, and for me, this is the first time seeing the Acolyte series logo on Star Wars product packaging. The Black Series figures predate the release of this figure, but the Black Series boxes did not feature the Acolyte series logo. They just had it in a plain font, so this is really fun to see, especially if you like to collect and keep them carded. For Jedi Master Sol, we have a dark blue color for the title plate there with the white font and behind the figure, though I have to say under certain light it almost has a subtle purple tint to it, but I think it's supposed to be a dark blue color. Really nice. Of course, he has a blue lightsaber, so I kind of like the match there. We have that single chrome racetrack surrounding the character art here on the side, and this is a really nice promo shot of Sol from the series. It's a little bit more darker, but I think that kind of fits the sort of the moody dark side tone of the Acolyte here. We can still see the details of his Jedi tunic really well. We can see the details on his belt, his lightsaber all the way down to the Jedi Order symbol on his belt buckle. So even though it's a little bit of a darker image, it's still clear and readable. Really nice. And there we can see the figure packaged in the bubble. We have one action figure with a soft goods Jedi robe, really cool, and we have 2 lightsabers, one unlit hilt with a peg for attaching to the belt and one lit saber. I like that we have the 2 options there. Moving on to the back, this is a new figure, so it has the new backing card style on the back rather than that black one where we had all the little squares of other figures from the wave and assortment that you could find. Now we have the accent color, which on the back does look a little bit more purple now that I can sort of see it in a larger color tone. We have a picture of the front of the backing card, and we have an image, an actual photo of the action figure out of the packaging posed. I find this really helpful. It gives you an idea of some of the poses you can do, shows off some of the accessories, and it's just a really nice sort of reference there just to sort of give you an idea about how this figure is going to look like if you open it up. So on the back of this new backing card style, we also have a character blurb, but for this one it is a blurb about the series rather than Jedi Master Sol. It reads, set at the end of the High Republic era, a former Padawan reunites with her Jedi Master to investigate a series of crimes, but the forces they confront turn out to be far more sinister and personal than anticipated. And that is repeated in a few different languages. We can see that this is VC329 right there at the top, and we also have the Vintage Collection logo here. The rest of the backing card here, we've just got a lot of text, of course, modern requirements. We've got to have it translated into different languages, barcode, warning, all of that kind of stuff, because it is sold in the toy aisle. It has to abide by all of those rules and regulations. So I kind of wish this was a little bit smaller, but anyway, I do like the top of the backing card. Kind of nostalgic about the old style, but I do like the additional information that this one gives. And sometimes, for me personally, that lineup of other figures available on the wave is just a little bit of a painful reminder about some of the ones that never made it to New Zealand. So at least I'm not looking at a wish list on the back of this one. I've just got information about the figure itself. Overall, it looks pretty cool, but I'm very excited to open this one up. So let's get stuck in. So now I have the Jedi Master Soul figure and the 2 lightsaber accessories out of the packaging so we can go over all of the details. And while I usually start with the face and head sculpt on figures, if they have a soft goods cloak, I like to focus on that first, then I can take it off and look at the details and articulation underneath. So I love the Jedi robes in the Acolyte series. They had different colors, slightly different shapes, and I really like the way that Hasbro created them for the Black Series line. So I'm interested to see how closely this smaller scale robe matches the one on the Black Series figure of Soul. So I'm already seeing a lot of similarities. We have the hood sort of as a one piece with the front of the robe. So it folds over the shoulders really nicely. It sort of just flows there. It just fits the scale of the figures really well. And you can see that that hood kind of flows down here into the back. This one's just a little bit squashed because of course it's been lying in its plastic tray for a while, and I'm curious to see. Yes, the hood is actually stitched down. So with the way that they sort of sew it with the front of it, I can imagine if you tried to put the hood up, it would just kind of sit in a really sort of big, wide shape. They're not really designed to put the hood up, and you can see that they've kind of reinforced that by actually having it stitched down. So I cannot lift the hood up, but I like that that keeps it in a really nice, tidy shape here across the back. Nice and tidy. You can see that they don't have sort of any sort of edging here to the seam. Those are raw edges, and of course we have raw edges over the rest of the cloak. I'm always really careful. I don't want to damage or get fibers loose from it. It just, if you start to sort of fuzzy up the edges, it starts to look a little bit messy, like the toy's been played with. And I really like the crisp edges on soft goods robes. You can just see just those nice tidy corners. We can see that there are side seams running down here at the side, plain straight there in the back, another side seam, and we have seams running down the back of the sleeves there as well. The sleeves come to a really good length here, just to kind of on the back of the knuckles, which is a pretty typical sort of length for a Jedi robe there, and on both hands. Sometimes they're a little bit long, so it completely covers the hand. Sometimes it hits more at the wrist, so when you sort of bend the elbow for a lightsaber pose, it looks very short. I like the fact that it hits at a really good length when the sleeves are straight down there, just so we see the hand, so it doesn't look a little bit sort of long, sort of pajama style or something like that, like a dressing gown. Really good length there, good color. We don't have anything different. There's no lining or anything like that. We can see very tidy seams on the inside, and we can see that the hem of this looks pretty straight across the bottom. I will note that I'm always really careful with soft goods. You can just see there is a couple of little points where it looks like tiny sort of little cutouts along the edge. And with these sort of fabrics, if you stretch them, you can create damage and sort of ladder the fabric. So I'm very careful with my soft goods robes, but I do really enjoy them. I just can't imagine getting this kind of look for a vintage collection figure with a plastic robe. You know, back in those old days where we kind of had, it was kind of almost like a vest, and then we had plastic sleeves that were separate to sort of the main body that you could sort of take on and off. It never looked quite as cool, and it does limit a lot the articulation that you can get, and the vintage collection is just so well known for the high articulation. So this, you know, we can take it off, we can move it out of the way. It really lets us get some cool poses, which is especially important for Jedi characters. I find, you know, we've got force moves, lightsaber, acrobatics. I want to get in there and do some really neat poses and stuff like that. So the soft goods cloaks, even though they're a little bit more fragile than plastic, you do need to be careful, especially around those raw edges, but I do really like them. I love the color on it. I like the way that it just fits in the back. Just got a few little creases here. It's kind of a little bit shaped to the Jedi tunic there in the back because it has been lying in the plastic tray, but I expect that with just a little bit of handling and put it on display, the fabric will just ease out over time. But that is in the back. Of course, mostly my figure is going to be facing the front, and he looks really cool. And of course, not having those big plastic cloaks does make them a little bit easier to stand up because they're just not as heavy, and sort of we're not going to tip the figure over. So I really want to check out his tunic details underneath. So I'm going to very carefully kind of wind his arms more towards the back so we can slide his robe off. Really love that robe because he has some really cool details that are quite hidden. Of course, the High Republic Jedi do wear armor components that we see on some of the Jedi journals in the Clone Wars, but they really have this really ornate gold and metallic finish to them. So completely hidden under that robe, we can see that he has some really neat High Republic Jedi armor here on his forearms and on the backs of his hands, on his gloves there. And we have that on the other side there as well. Fantastic gold metallic finish there. Really nice. Again, if we had a plastic sculpted robe, I don't think we would get this awesome sort of detail there. Really cool. And now we can go over all of the details on this figure. So I'm going to start out with his head. So pretty good likeness here. We can see that we have a separate hair piece because of course we've got these soft little strands hanging down in front of the ears. Very hard to do that as an all-in-one sculpt. And that join is really tidy. Because we get that two-part construction, we don't get paint bleed between hairlines. That's something that always catches my eye. But when they are separate pieces, of course, they're done in their own plastic colors, so we don't get any kind of overlap with paint there. So that is a really nice, tidy seam between the hairpiece and the forehead. And of course, we have that new digital printing there on the face. Really fantastic with the fine detail. We've got eyebrows, eyes, and a bit of an accent there on the lips as well. You can see just how tidily that hair fits around the ears there. Looking really nice. And of course he has, as I tend to call it, the Qui-Gon, the sort of half up do, where the top of the hair is pulled back into a short ponytail and the rest of it is hanging loose. There are a lot of similarities between Jedi Master Soul and Qui-Gon, so I think that that's kind of fun that the hairstyle is very similar. His sits just around the shoulder. If I tip his head back a little bit, it's just kind of hitting there, but I don't feel like it's going to stop me from getting any poses. And I can also turn his head completely to the side. It is just scooting there around the shoulders, so the hair is not going to sort of stop you from getting any articulation there. And of course we can still tip it forward to the front there. Not as much as on some other scales, Black Series with the larger scale. Sometimes you can tip the head around a little bit, but this is plenty for this scale of figure. Now we have these fantastic orange toned tunics for the High Republic, really vibrant, very different to the prequels. So I can see that I have a little bit of a paint flaw on this one. Some of the sort of beige color from the tunic has been just a little bit smudged here on the orange tunic. Sometimes if you're kind of gentle and careful, you can kind of scratch off that extra paint. Sometimes it's on there for good. It's a little bit minimal, so it's not exactly catching my eye. I am looking up very close. But we do want our figures to be as well painted as we want them to be. There is like a little bit of, I think that's maybe just a tiny little bit of a plastic flaw at the base of the neck. Again, I'm looking up really close. Sometimes I go, if I have an older version of a figure, I go and grab it from my collection and do a side-by-side comparison. And sometimes I'm really shocked at the paint flaws that I have in some of my older figures. So I know Hasbro has really improved, but still every now and again there's just little things that sort of stand out to me. But overall, pretty tidy paint work on the face and the details here on the belt. The belt details, some of them look a little bit flatter than others. If I just raise his arms up, we've got a pouch here and a tool device here painted in silver. We've got black details there. We've got the gold belt buckle there. Now on the backing card, we can see that there is a Jedi Order symbol in the middle circle of his belt buckle. And here it's too small. We just have a circle shape there in the center of the belt buckle. We've got some sort of, looks like food capsules here in silver. They're a little bit flat, but of course they would be pretty small. And around the back of the belt, we just have sort of strapping details there. No other pouches or sort of capsules or anything like that. And we do have, it's not my favorite sort of style, but I know this is pretty much the only way to add tiny little lightsaber hilts to the belt. We have this little pig hole here, just sort of lower from the belt there. It's not my favorite, but it does work, and we will test that out shortly. So moving down, we can see that this tunic does have splits in the plastic running up to the belt. So hopefully that will help with the articulation, because of course we want to be able to move his legs around. Just doing a quick little check, I can see how flexible the lower half of the tunic is. We've got some good flex there, so hopefully we'll be able to sort of get some kicks going with the legs. And the front feels a little bit stiffer because we've got a bit more detail running in here. We've got different sort of highs and lows in the texture. It's a little bit more flatter in the back, so we don't have sort of stuff really sort of interfering with the flexibility of the plastic. I can see we've got that articulation point at the top of the thighs like we expect. Plain brown, sort of mid-brown pants here with nice good ripples sort of sculpted there into the plastic. We can see the articulation at the knees, and we have sort of reddish brown boots here as well with articulation at the ankles. So I love this just armor on the hands here. Really, really nice. Very cool. I like that paintwork there as well. Little bit of a shadow mark here. Again, I'm always looking very up close at my figures. I like spending time with my figures when I open them up. I really like going over all of the details. It's kind of like, you know, the closest we adult collectors come to playing with our toys, really seeing all of the details, the sculpting, the articulation. It's a lot of fun. So overall, pretty cool figure. Pretty sort of like just a scaled down version of the Black Series one, which is kind of fun there. Just those few tiny little paint flaws that could be tidier. You know, I'm looking at sort of the V-neck paint lines here. Pretty straight, pretty even. And we've just got that sort of tiny little smudge there to the side. But yeah. One thing that is sort of standing out to me is that we have got these really obvious articulation points here at the shoulders, especially when the arms are down. We've got these sort of big cutouts there. Sometimes we've got costume elements or something that can sort of hide them. But I do realize part of the attraction of the vintage collection is the high posability, and sometimes there's a trade-off between sort of having those articulation just being a little bit visible. But I'm sure that we're going to get some really good poses. So let's test out what we can do with the arms. Of course, we can go full sort of T-pose here. The tunic is just hitting on the arms there, but it's not stopping me from getting a very high pose. We'll get a little bit of rotation here. We can get to there. He's a little bit stiff because he's straight out of the packet, of course. Let's test out the elbows. The paler colors sometimes aren't as good at hiding the articulation as the darker colors like black. So we can kind of see those sort of cutouts there. But of course, when we move the elbows, everything's looking really nice because that's all sort of hidden in the back. Looks really nice from the front. He's got sort of quite flowy sleeves, but because he's got this forearm armor, he doesn't have the sort of the prequel era sort of Jedi tunic sleeves that sort of flare out around the wrist. So we've got this sort of interesting sort of rippling in the fabric because it's tucked in to the glove and gauntlet here, which does a pretty good job of kind of trying to hide in that articulation. And it means that we get some really interesting sculpting there around the elbow. Really nice and tidy around the wrist here. Of course, we don't have anything that's really getting in the way. We've got that side to side here, and of course we can rotate. And this one, I believe, is going to be, where is this? This is really tight. Okay, this one is also side to side as well. There we go. And we've got, I kind of like the grip on this one. It's like a little bit, sometimes the grips look like they're holding as an invisible cup or something like that. And sometimes just with just a really subtle change, it looks like a forced gesture. And there's something about this hand, just with that tiny sort of little gesture with the finger, it looks a little bit more like a forced gesture rather than I've got an invisible accessory in my hand. And I really like that. Just a little bit different, you know, he hasn't got his hands all lined up. They're just a little bit more like this, which looks a little bit more like a gesture, because most of the time the Jedi characters, they only come with one accessory, and for the most part they are holding it in their right hand. So this one is a lot more of a grip. We can see that the thumb and is sort of extended here, and that top finger is sculpted together with the hand. So that's a lightsaber grip. This one, we've got that pointed finger just extended. I really like that. It always looks a little bit odd to me when their left hand looks like they're trying to hold an accessory that they simply don't have. So I like that. That's really nice. Cool. Okay, so we can see the big Jedi belts are the perfect spot to put that mid-torso articulation. He's got a little bit of a squeak to him as I'm moving him around, but it's not fighting me. In fact, when I was moving his arms, he's actually quite bendy here at the middle. Not to the point where he's kind of flopping around, but I can get a bit of articulation there. The belts in the High Republic are a little bit taller and wider than sort of prequel Jedi, so it is kind of hitting a little bit higher on the chest than say a prequel Jedi would, but overall pretty nice, and we don't have too much of a gape around here as well. No big gaps there. And if I lift up the arm, you can see the sculpting there of the tunic sort of underneath meeting there at the belt. So really nice. I can feel like I can get a lot of posability with them there. So we've got these splits at the side. The very edge of this one hasn't been completely painted. I can kind of see that orange plastic there in sort of that side cutout, and we've got that a little bit here at the side. I don't know if that's supposed to be painted because I can kind of just see that orange paint. I know that this split is not really supposed to be there. It's more of a function of the toy, so we can just sort of imagine, you know, the tunic would be all the way sort of closed like that. But let's test out how far we can kick these legs up. So I can see that articulation point here at the thigh, and he's a little bit stiff because he's straight out of the packet. He's actually kind of turning. There we go. If I can just squeeze the top of his thigh, I can rotate that there. But let's see how high I can. Oh, are we going to get... okay. I can kick that out to the side. That's kind of where it wants to go because we've got this split here, but that's not really coming out to the front. It's the plastic of the tunic comes down quite low. I can get it up a little bit, but that's fighting me, and I really don't want to. I feel like any higher and I'm going to risk that split. And you can see it kind of just slowly comes back down. That's about as high as I naturally want to get the tunic, and we can see we can get a bit of gaping there. The tunic's just sitting really straight. It's not curving with the leg, so it's just kind of sticking out. So that's about as high as we're going to get of a kick, unless we sort of want to go out to the side, in which case, you know, we can get out to about here pretty easily for any sort of kicking poses. But of course, let's check out the knees. Okay, so nice and easy to there. Pretty standard stuff, and we can get the toe pointed to there. Nice. Okay. I thought that tunic might be a limiting factor for the legs. I do find that with some of the Jedi tunics, they do come down quite low. Some of them are almost close to the knees, and because they're plastic, sometimes on some of the Black Series figures, they do the sort of lower half of the tunic with soft goods, so you get a little bit more flexibility. I think it's very hard for them to do that in the 3.75 inch scale. We've just got plastic there. So he's got those sort of cutouts there for articulation, but it's not really helping us much in terms of front to back. But for me personally, I'm not the adventurous artistic one doing the really cool poses with the stunning toy photography. I'm very jealous of those people that can do that, but for the most part, most of my figures are standing on 2 feet in a pretty upright, and I'm doing most of the posing with their arms and, you know, sort of gesturing with weapons and things like that. I know that you could do some pretty cool things with stands and things like that, but I tend to just have my figures standing up, and he's pretty steady. You know, I've been twisting his legs around and stuff like that. I will put his cape back on shortly, but let's check out his accessories, the 2 lightsabers, and I'm going to start out with the hilt. So I'm going to raise up the belt, raise his arm up so I can see the belt. Now, this lightsaber is pretty small, to be honest. I know it's a 3.75 inch, but you can see it's kind of a little bit plain. It almost just looks like a straight tube. We've got the attachment peg here on the side. We've got a little bit of a detail that's sort of sculpted in here, but it doesn't have any paint to it. It's almost a little bit hard to show. It just looks like a gray. There is a little cutout section that looks like it's maybe got some darker gray paint, but it's so hard to tell because it's pretty much the same color. But let's test that peg out. So sometimes just, you know, a tiny little bit of extra plastic makes these really not fit. And I have this paranoia about snapping a peg off in the base. So I'm being very careful. That goes in there and it looks like that. So it was a little bit of a push. It didn't just slide in there. I had to be very careful. I do not want to break it. But there we go. That looks pretty good. Of course, the backing card, he has his lightsaber pictured on there. I kind of wish there was just a little bit more paint on this one, you know, in the backing card. If I just grab it for reference, we can see that he does have metallic colors. It's a little bit more, that looks like sort of an aluminium, metallic silver sort of tone to it there. And looking at this, we don't, it's just more of a plastic gray. It's kind of like a dark metallic, but not the sort of this metallic silver paint that we see on some other accessories. I can kind of understand where Hasbro's going, but I kind of wanted a more of a vibrant silver to match that picture there. But anyway, let's check out this saber. So of course they are different to the Black series. They are sculpted as one piece. We don't have to remove the blade. I don't like having to remove the blade on the Black series. I'm always worried about snapping off those tiny little attachment points. Now his lightsaber is very much a tube, so there isn't a lot of different sort of texture running up. I do like that this one doesn't have that peg. I find that always gets in the way of putting it in the hands. But yeah, there's not a lot of distinction between the blade and the emitter here. There's just a tiny sort of little recessed groove, just tiny little sort of difference there. But otherwise it looks like it's a pretty straight design with just a few sort of greeblies here at the end. And of course we don't have a silver metallic. It's more of sort of a dark gunmetal gray. Reminds me more of a blaster color rather than a lightsaber hilt. I kind of always think of lightsabers as being that really brilliant, like silver jewelry silver, rather than sort of like gun silver there, which we have the color here. But of course, it's going to be pretty hidden once we put it in his hand. So because it's pretty sort of, we don't have any large boxes or anything like that, like some of the original trilogy lightsabers, I'm expecting that this will fit into his hand nice and easily. So I'm just going to hold his hand here because they do rotate. They do want to sort of let go. Okay, so I can get that into his hand, very close to his face there for a minute. Let's get that. Okay, so it's actually just like fits in there pretty easily. It's not actually the most securest. I feel like I could probably pull that out of his hand fairly easily, but he is holding on to that well. And to be honest, I like it when they do just kind of slip in there very easily. It looks good. We'll probably try out some two-handed lightsaber poses as well. See how close in I can get that hand, because I do like testing out how close I can get in the other hand. Let's see if I can get him into a two-handed grip. I feel like it might. Can I get there? Almost. He's just moving his hands a little bit, but the other hand, even though it isn't that sort of C grip, just want to test this out. See if he'll actually, he kind of grips it. It's not a sort of clean cut. He kind of grips it. So it looks okay, but it's not really designed to go in his left hand. It's mostly being held in there by his thumb. But yes, I'm sure I'll be able to get a two-handed grip because I can get his hands together there at the front. Just, yeah, quite tight. Just with a little bit of rotating, I'm pretty sure I'll be able to get a two-handed grip there on the lightsaber. But let's put his robe back on and sort of get the whole figure sort of posed and all together. Getting his robe and lit lightsaber accessory, I can get him to hold his lightsaber in both hands together in a two-handed grip. It takes a little bit of work because we do get just a little bit of bulk around the elbows with the soft goods robe. It does take a little bit of work to get him into that pose, but it does work. It of course pulls his robe in a little bit more closer to the body as well, but he does actually stand up pretty well with everything all together, and I think this looks really cool. Overall, I think it's a really fun figure. He was such a standout character in the show. I'm looking forward to adding more characters from the Acolyte to my action figure collection. Still waiting for Hasbro to announce the Stranger in either of the action figure lines, Black Series or Vintage Collection. I need the Stranger in my Star Wars collection. Really cool character. And I want someone for Soul to face off against, because of course lightsabers, you got to have them facing someone. He looks really cool. I love the detail details on his armor, the soft goods robe, the likeness, the accessories, all fantastic. Just that one little patch of paint on the chest, but you can see it's pretty much hidden when I'm posing him like this with the robe. It sort of covers out that paint little splotch there. So overall, this is probably how I'm going to add this figure to my collection, posed like this, and I think he looks fantastic. Really excited to finally have some new figures here in New Zealand and an exciting unboxing of a new character to add to my display. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another vintage collection figure, checked out all of the details and accessories, and had a lot of fun. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a vintage collection fan, I recently opened the Darth Revan figure, VC329. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole vintage collection playlist. This is the way.